Blake Harrison was the kind of man who never lost. At 35, he stood tall as the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the United States, a giant in an industry that worshipped power and innovation. His life was a perfectly curated showcase of success: luxury mansions sprawled across exclusive neighborhoods, sports cars that roared with authority, and a network of influential connections that could bend almost any situation to his will. Blake thrived in this world of wealth and prestige. To him, life was a game of power, and he always played to win. The people around him were merely pieces on a chessboard, strategically moved to secure his victories. He was the master of his universe, untouchable and unchallenged. It was on one of those lazy Saturday afternoons that Blake found himself at a place that was laughably beneath his status, a local McDonald's. To him and his friends, it was an ironic choice, a joke to entertain themselves by pretending, for just a moment, that they were ordinary people. They sat at the back of the restaurant, laughing over burgers and sodas as if it were the most absurd thing they could be doing. "You've done it all, Blake," Caleb Turner, his oldest friend, declared, leaning back with a smug grin. "You've made millions, conquered the boardrooms, dated the most beautiful women, but I doubt you can win this next bet." Blake's sharp blue eyes sparkled with intrigue. Caleb always knew how to push his buttons, and the word bet was enough to hook him. "What's the challenge?" Blake asked, his voice dripping with confidence. Caleb's eyes glinted with mischief. "I bet you can't marry a woman who has absolutely nothing to do with our world." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And I don't mean models or socialites trying to play humble. I mean someone truly ordinary." Blake's curiosity flickered. "What do you mean by ordinary?" Caleb discreetly pointed at a waitress cleaning a nearby table. Her light brown hair was tied in a simple ponytail, and she wore no noticeable makeup. Her face showed fatigue, yet her eyes held a quiet resilience. "That one. The single mom working here at McDonald's. I bet you can't win her over and marry her. No contracts, no schemes. It has to be a real marriage." Blake turned to look at her. She was wiping down tables methodically, not paying them any attention. Her name tag read Rachel, and from the way she moved, it was clear she was no stranger to hard work. Blake's lips curled into a half smile. "You want me to marry a McDonald's waitress?" he asked incredulously. Caleb's grin widened. "Exactly. And I'll give you $2 million if you manage it. No tricks, no loopholes. Real marriage." $2 million was pocket change to Blake. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the challenge. And Blake Harrison never turned down a challenge. He glanced back at Rachel, who was now balancing a tray full of used cups, her movements precise and practiced. To him, she was just another game to win, another bet to conquer. His pride was on the line, and he wasn't about to back down. $2 million, huh? Blake lifted his soda cup and clinked it against Caleb's. "Better get that check ready, Caleb, because I'm going to win." His friends burst into laughter, convinced they were witnessing the start of another victory for the unstoppable Blake Harrison. But deep down, Blake felt a strange excitement. This was going to be different. Rachel was unlike any woman he'd ever pursued, and he relished the thought of breaking through her guarded exterior. As he watched her continue her shift, Blake's eyes gleamed with determination. He had no idea that this game he was about to play would change his life in ways he never saw coming. Blake Harrison always knew how to win. Whether it was closing multi-million-dollar deals, charming investors, or dating women who were as flawless as they were superficial, Blake never faced rejection. He thrived on challenges and conquered them with an effortless smile. This time, the challenge was different. Rachel Miller was unlike any woman he had ever pursued. She didn't bat an eye at his expensive suits or his designer watch. She didn't giggle at his jokes or fall for his charismatic charm. In fact, she barely noticed him at all. The first time Blake approached Rachel, he was ready with his most confident smile. He had rehearsed his lines, prepared to sweep her off her feet with casual charm. "Rachel, right?" he said, leaning against the counter with a relaxed posture. She looked up briefly, her face neutral. "Yes. Can I help you with something?" Blake blinked, momentarily thrown off by her lack of interest. He wasn't used to this. Women usually responded to him with wide-eyed admiration or flirtatious smiles. "I don't think you've served me before," he continued, maintaining his easy grin. Rachel blinked, unimpressed. "I've worked here for over a year. You probably didn't notice." Blake laughed, trying to brush off the awkwardness. "Probably not, but that changes today. How about we grab a coffee sometime?" Rachel raised an eyebrow, her expression flat. "Sorry, I'm working." She turned away without another word, leaving Blake standing there, stunned and slightly embarrassed. He watched as she moved gracefully around the restaurant, attending to customers with practiced efficiency. Her light brown hair was tied in a practical ponytail, and her uniform fit her modestly. She wore no makeup, yet there was a natural beauty about her. Blake couldn't understand why she hadn't fallen for his charm. It was a blow to his ego, but more than that, it intrigued him. No one had ever turned him down so bluntly before. This woman was different. She was a challenge. And Blake loved challenges. The next day, Blake returned to McDonald's, this time without his usual aura of arrogance. He dressed more casually, hoping to seem less intimidating. He watched Rachel from a distance, observing her interactions with customers. She was polite but distant, professional but detached. Blake realized that his usual tactics wouldn't work. Rachel wasn't interested in charm or wealth. She didn't seem to care about his status or his money. If anything, she seemed to avoid any form of unnecessary attention. Determined to win, Blake decided to change his strategy. He started small, with casual greetings and friendly smiles. He ordered his food and made sure to say thank you each time Rachel served him. He was careful not to overdo it, keeping his demeanor relaxed and respectful. One afternoon, Blake noticed Rachel struggling to carry a large trash bag to the dumpster. Without hesitation, he walked over and took the bag from her hands. "Here, let me help." Rachel looked surprised but didn't protest. "Thanks," she said quietly. Blake smiled, feeling a small victory. "No problem. It's the least I can do after all the great service you give." She glanced at him curiously, as if trying to figure out his intentions. Blake held her gaze, his expression sincere. For the first time, she smiled, just a little. Blake felt a flutter of excitement. It was a small step, but it was progress. He was getting through to her, slowly but surely. Over the next few weeks, Blake continued to visit McDonald's regularly. He made sure to sit in Rachel's section, always offering a polite smile and friendly conversation. He asked about her day, her work, and sometimes even shared little stories about his own experiences. At first, Rachel was cautious, responding with short answers and polite nods. But gradually, she began to open up. She talked about her daughter, Chloe, and how she worked long hours to provide for her. She mentioned her dreams of going back to school one day to become a teacher. Blake listened, genuinely interested. He was captivated by Rachel's strength and resilience. She was nothing like the women he was used to. She was real, grounded, and fiercely independent. The more he learned about her, the more he admired her. And the more he admired her, the less he thought about the bet. Rachel was no longer just a challenge or a conquest. She was becoming someone he genuinely cared about. One evening, as Rachel wiped down the tables after her shift, Blake waited for her outside the restaurant. When she stepped out, visibly exhausted, he offered her a ride home. Rachel hesitated, her guard instantly up. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said cautiously. Blake raised his hands in surrender. "No pressure. I just thought it might be easier than taking the bus. But I understand." He took a step back, showing respect for her boundaries. Rachel looked at him, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. She gave him a small nod. "Thanks for the offer. Maybe some other time." Blake watched as she walked away, her silhouette disappearing into the dimly lit street. He realized he was smiling. For the first time in his life, Blake felt a genuine sense of anticipation. Rachel Miller was unlike anyone he'd ever met, and winning her heart was turning out to be the most meaningful challenge he'd ever faced. But as he stood there, his hands in his pockets, he couldn't shake the feeling of guilt creeping into his chest. He had started this all because of a bet, a silly game to prove his power and charm. Yet, somewhere along the way, the game had changed. Blake no longer cared about the bet or the $2 million. He just wanted Rachel. Blake Harrison was not a man who believed in patience. In business, he seized opportunities and made decisions in the blink of an eye. In his love life, he was used to getting what he wanted without delay. But with Rachel Miller, everything was different. After weeks of casual visits and polite smiles, Blake realized that his usual charm wasn't enough. Rachel wasn't falling for his witty jokes or his confident demeanor. She was cautious, guarded, and unwilling to let him in easily. But Blake was nothing if not persistent. He continued to visit McDonald's, each time approaching her with a respectful and sincere attitude. He never pushed her boundaries, and he never demanded her attention. Instead, he showed interest in her life, genuinely curious about who she was beyond the red and yellow uniform. Gradually, Rachel began to warm up to him. Their conversations grew longer, evolving from brief pleasantries to meaningful discussions. Blake learned that Rachel was a single mother to a bright-eyed little girl named Chloe. She spoke about her daughter with a love so deep and pure that it touched something in Blake he didn't know existed. One evening, as Rachel wiped down tables, Blake asked casually, "How's Chloe doing?" Rachel's face softened, her eyes lighting up. "She's great. She just started kindergarten, and she loves it. She keeps drawing these little pictures of us holding hands." Blake's heart softened at the thought. He pictured Rachel and Chloe, a small, tight-knit duo facing the world together. "She sounds like an amazing kid," Blake said genuinely. Rachel's smile was warm but guarded. "She is. She's my world." For the first time, Blake felt a pang of envy. Rachel had something he didn't: unconditional love. He was surrounded by people who admired his wealth, his power, his influence, but no one loved him just for being Blake. Not like how Chloe loved Rachel. Blake wanted to know more about Rachel, to understand the struggles she faced and the dreams she had put on hold. He wanted to be part of her world, not as a conqueror but as someone who truly cared. One rainy afternoon, Blake showed up at McDonald's, drenched from head to toe. His hair was tousled, and his usual polished look was replaced by a disheveled appearance. Rachel looked up, surprised. "Didn't expect to see you today. Forgot your umbrella?" Blake laughed, shaking the raindrops off his jacket. "Yeah, you could say that. Can I get a hot coffee?" Rachel poured him a steaming cup, her eyes lingering on his wet hair and slightly flushed cheeks. Blake looked different today, more human, less perfect. It made him more relatable, more real. As he sat down, he noticed Chloe peeking out from behind the counter, her big blue eyes curious and shy. Blake waved, his face lighting up with a smile. "Hi, Chloe." Chloe hesitated, then waved back timidly before hiding behind her mom's leg. Rachel chuckled, patting her daughter's head. "She's a little shy around strangers." Blake's expression softened. "I get that. I can be pretty scary," he joked, making Chloe giggle softly. It was a sweet sound, innocent and pure. Blake felt his heart swell with a warmth he hadn't known before. "Do you like ice cream, Chloe?" Blake asked, his eyes twinkling. Chloe peeked out, her eyes widening with excitement. "Yeah," she exclaimed, her shyness momentarily forgotten. Blake turned to Rachel. "Would it be okay if I bought Chloe an ice cream? Just as a little treat?" Rachel hesitated, her protective instincts kicking in. But when she saw Chloe's hopeful face, she relented. "All right, but just one scoop." Blake grinned, nodding enthusiastically. "One scoop it is." Watching Chloe's face light up as she licked the chocolate ice cream, Blake felt an unexpected surge of joy. He couldn't remember the last time he felt this happy just watching someone else smile. It was simple, genuine, and beautifully pure. Rachel watched the scene unfold, her heart softening. For a moment, she let herself believe that maybe Blake was different, that maybe he was more than just a rich playboy with too much charm. But her past experiences reminded her to be cautious, to guard her heart. She had been hurt before, and she couldn't afford to let anyone hurt Chloe. Over the following weeks, Blake continued to spend time with Rachel and Chloe. He showed up at McDonald's more often, not just to see Rachel but to bring Chloe little gifts, coloring books, crayons, and once, a small teddy bear that made Chloe squeal with delight. Blake found himself caring for Chloe in a way he never expected. He loved listening to her chatter about school, watching her eyes light up with wonder as she shared her stories. He admired Rachel even more for the way she balanced work and motherhood with grace and strength. Rachel began to see a different side of Blake, one that was caring, patient, and genuinely interested in her and Chloe's lives. He never once flaunted his wealth or tried to impress her with expensive gifts. Instead, he showed up, consistently and sincerely. One evening, as Blake walked Rachel and Chloe home, Chloe held his hand, her tiny fingers wrapped around his. Blake's heart fluttered as he looked down at her trusting face. He felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility and protectiveness. At Rachel's door, Chloe gave Blake a quick hug before running inside, leaving him standing awkwardly with Rachel. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world faded away. Blake's heart raced, his gaze dropping to Rachel's lips. He wanted to kiss her, to hold her and promise he'd never let her go. But he didn't. Instead, he took a step back, respecting her boundaries. "Good night, Rachel." Rachel's eyes softened, her voice gentle. "Good night, Blake." As Blake walked away, his heart pounded with emotions he didn't fully understand. He was falling for Rachel. He was falling for Chloe. And for the first time in his life, Blake Harrison was scared. This wasn't just about winning a bet anymore. This was real. And real meant vulnerable. Real meant risking his heart. But as he glanced back and saw Rachel watching him from the window, Blake knew one thing for certain. She was worth the risk. Blake Harrison was in deep trouble, and he knew it. He was falling in love with Rachel Miller, and it terrified him. This wasn't just about the bet anymore. This was real. And real meant vulnerable. Real meant risking his heart. For weeks, Blake had immersed himself in Rachel's world. He spent his afternoons at McDonald's, listening to her stories, helping her with heavy tasks, and occasionally treating Chloe to ice cream. He learned about Rachel's dreams of becoming a teacher, her struggles as a single mother, and the sacrifices she made every day for Chloe. She was beautiful not just in appearance but in spirit, in her kindness, her resilience, and her unwavering love for her daughter. Blake was no longer playing a game. He genuinely cared about Rachel and Chloe. He found himself looking forward to every moment spent with them, feeling a warmth he hadn't known before. For the first time in his life, Blake wanted more than just power and success. He wanted a family. He wanted them. But Caleb's words kept echoing in his mind, a cruel reminder of the bet that started it all. I bet you can't marry a McDonald's waitress. No contracts, no schemes. A real marriage. $2 million if you pull it off. The guilt was eating him alive. He knew he had to tell Rachel the truth, but every time he tried, the words got stuck in his throat. How could he confess that he started this relationship as a joke, as a means to prove his power? How could he tell her that it all began as a heartless game? Blake was torn between his love for Rachel and his fear of losing her. But he knew he couldn't keep lying. If he truly loved her, he had to be honest. One Saturday afternoon, Blake took Rachel and Chloe to the park. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and Chloe's laughter echoed as she played on the swings. Blake watched her, his heart swelling with affection. Rachel sat beside him on the bench, her eyes following Chloe's every move. She looked peaceful, happy. Blake wanted to freeze this moment forever. But the guilt was suffocating him. He knew he couldn't keep pretending. He turned to Rachel, his face serious. Rachel, there's something I need to tell you. Rachel looked at him, her eyes curious but trusting. What is it? Blake took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He was about to confess when he heard a familiar voice behind him. Well, look who's playing house. Blake's blood ran cold. He turned around and saw Caleb standing there, grinning smugly. His heart sank. Caleb looked at Rachel, his eyes gleaming with amusement. So, this is the famous waitress. I've got to say, Blake, you went all out for this one. Didn't think you'd actually go through with the bet. Rachel's face paled, her eyes widening in shock. She looked at Blake, confusion and hurt flashing across her face. Bet? What is he talking about? Blake's mouth went dry. He tried to reach for her, but she stepped back, her body stiff with tension. Rachel, please. I can explain. Caleb laughed, clearly enjoying the drama. Oh, he didn't tell you? Blake here made a bet that he could marry a McDonald's waitress. $2 million if he pulled it off. And look at him, going the extra mile, playing the perfect boyfriend. Bravo, Blake. You really had me convinced. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, her body trembling. A bet, she whispered, her voice breaking. You did all of this, for a bet? Blake felt his heart shatter. No, Rachel, it started as a bet, but it became real. I love you. I love Chloe. I never meant to hurt you. Rachel's face contorted with pain and anger. How could you? How could you play with my heart like that? You made me believe, you made Chloe believe. She choked on her words, tears streaming down her face. I trusted you. Blake felt his world crumbling. Rachel, please, let me explain. I didn't know I'd fall in love. I didn't know you'd mean so much to me." Rachel shook her head, her eyes cold and distant. "I was just a game to you. A challenge. You think you can just buy people's hearts? You think you can play God with other people's lives?" Blake tried to reach for her, his voice desperate. "Rachel, don't leave. Please. I'll do anything to fix this. Just don't go." Rachel looked at him, her face etched with betrayal. "I can't believe I fell for this. I can't believe I let you into my life, into Chloe's life." She wiped her tears angrily, her voice cold and detached. "It's over, Blake. I never want to see you again." Before Blake could stop her, Rachel grabbed Chloe and walked away, her shoulders rigid with pain. Chloe looked back, her innocent eyes filled with confusion. "Blake, are you coming?" Blake felt his heart break. His vision blurred with tears as he watched them walk away, disappearing into the distance. He stood there, frozen, his chest aching with regret and despair. Caleb clapped his hands mockingly. "Well, that was quite a show. I didn't think you'd actually fall for her." Guess the great Blake Harrison finally lost. Blake's fists clenched, his anger boiling over. He turned to Caleb, his eyes blazing with fury. You ruined everything." Caleb shrugged, unfazed. "Don't blame me. You were the one who played the game. You were the one who made the bet. You knew the rules." Blake's jaw tightened, his voice low and menacing. "To hell with your bet. I don't want your money. I don't want any part of this anymore." Caleb laughed. "Wow, you really did fall for her, didn't you? Who would have thought?" Blake Harrison, the heartless player, finally found his Achilles heel. Blake's shoulders sagged, his anger giving way to grief. He looked at the empty park bench where Rachel had been sitting, her warmth and laughter now just a haunting memory. "I lost her," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I lost them both." Caleb's grin faded, his expression softening. "Well, that's the price of playing the game, Blake. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose everything." Blake stood there, broken and defeated, his heart heavy with regret. He had played the game and lost. But this time, it wasn't just a game. It was his life. It was his heart. And he didn't know how to fix it. Blake Harrison was a man who never gave up. But standing in front of Rachel's apartment door, his heart heavy with guilt and regret, he wondered if this was the one battle he was destined to lose. It had been weeks since she walked away, her eyes filled with betrayal, her words cutting him deeper than he ever thought possible. Since that day, Blake's life had fallen apart. He couldn't focus at work, he couldn't sleep, and he couldn't escape the memories of Rachel and Chloe. The laughter, the warmth, the love, it haunted him every waking moment. He had lost them, and it was all his fault. But Blake wasn't ready to give up, not yet. He loved Rachel, truly and deeply. And he loved Chloe as if she were his own daughter. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could fight for their future. He could prove to Rachel that his love was real, that he was more than just a player in a cruel game. He could become the man she and Chloe deserved. Blake took a deep breath, his hand trembling as he knocked on the door. His heart pounded as he heard footsteps approaching. The door opened, and Rachel stood before him, her face pale, her eyes guarded. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept in days. Blake's heart ached at the pain he had caused her. "What are you doing here?" Rachel's voice was cold, her posture stiff. Blake swallowed, his chest tightening. "I needed to see you. To apologize. To explain." Rachel crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "You already explained. It was a bet. A joke. A game. Blake's eyes filled with remorse. It started that way, yes. But it didn't end that way. It became real, Rachel. I fell in love with you. With Chloe. I didn't know it would happen, but it did. Rachel's jaw tightened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. How can I believe anything you say? How do I know this isn't just another game? Blake's shoulders sagged, his voice breaking. I don't expect you to believe me. I don't deserve your trust. But I'm here because I love you, and I love Chloe. I can't walk away without fighting for you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. He handed it to Rachel, his hands shaking. I declined the money. I told Caleb to keep his $2 million. I don't want it. I don't want anything from that bet. Rachel looked at the envelope, her face softening slightly. You gave up $2 million? Blake nodded, his eyes earnest. I don't care about the money. I care about you. I care about Chloe. You mean more to me than any amount of money ever could. Rachel's lips trembled, her eyes searching his face. I don't know if I can forgive you, Blake. You hurt me. You hurt my daughter. Blake's heart broke at her words, his voice choked with emotion. I know. And I hate myself for it. But I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you let me. I will prove to you that my love is real. That I am real. Rachel looked down, her fingers clutching the envelope tightly. Blake's heart pounded, fear and hope twisting inside him. After a long, agonizing silence, Rachel finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen. I need time, she whispered, her voice fragile. I need time to heal. To trust again. Blake's chest tightened, but he nodded, his eyes full of understanding. I'll wait. As long as it takes. I'll wait. Rachel looked at him, her eyes softening for the first time. Thank you for coming back. For fighting for us. Blake's lips curved into a shaky smile, his heart swelling with hope. I'll never stop fighting for you. Rachel hesitated, then stepped back, her voice quiet. Goodbye, Blake. The door closed softly, leaving Blake standing alone in the hallway. But for the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. She hadn't slammed the door in his face. She hadn't said it was over. Blake walked away, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. He had a chance, and he was determined to earn her love back, no matter how long it took. Over the next few months, Blake dedicated himself to proving his love for Rachel and Chloe. He showed up at Chloe's school events, always staying in the background, never imposing but always present. He left small gifts on their doorstep, books for Chloe, flowers for Rachel, each accompanied by a heartfelt note. He volunteered at the community center where Rachel helped out, working behind the scenes without seeking recognition. He wanted Rachel to see that he was there for her, not for show but because he genuinely cared. Blake also took a hard look at his own life. He reevaluated his priorities, cutting ties with people who encouraged his toxic behavior, including Caleb. He focused on becoming a better man, not just for Rachel but for himself. He didn't push Rachel, didn't demand her forgiveness. He was patient, giving her the space she needed to heal. He waited, even when it hurt, even when he doubted if she would ever take him back. On a chilly autumn afternoon, Blake stood outside Chloe's school, watching her run towards Rachel with a bright smile. His heart clenched with longing, but he didn't approach. He respected Rachel's boundaries. But to his surprise, Rachel looked up and waved at him, a hesitant smile on her lips. Blake's heart skipped a beat, hope surging through him. Rachel walked over, Chloe's hand in hers. Her eyes were soft, her expression gentle. "Would you like to join us for dinner tonight?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "Chloe keeps asking about you." Blake's throat tightened, his heart pounding. I would love that." Rachel looked down, a faint blush on her cheeks. "I'm not saying everything's forgiven. But I think I'm ready to try again." Blake's eyes filled with tears, his voice breaking. "I promise you, Rachel, I won't let you down this time." Rachel's eyes glistened with emotion as she squeezed Chloe's hand. "I believe you." Chloe looked up, her face lighting up with excitement. "Blake, are you coming home with us?" Blake's heart swelled with joy as he smiled at Chloe. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm coming home." Rachel's lips curved into a smile, her eyes shining with hope. Together, they walked towards Rachel's car, Chloe's laughter echoing in the air. For the first time in his life, Blake felt complete. He had finally found where he belonged, with Rachel and Chloe. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But he was ready to fight for them every single day. Blake had lost the bet, but he had won something far more valuable. He had won their hearts. He had won his family. And that was the greatest victory of his life. Blake Harrison once believed that life was a game of power, wealth, and control. He thought he could conquer anything, from boardrooms to hearts, with charm and money. But in his pursuit of victory, he discovered the one thing he couldn't buy: love. Rachel Miller showed him the value of honesty, trust, and vulnerability. She taught him that love isn't about winning or losing, but about giving, forgiving, and growing together. Through her, Blake found a new purpose, a new identity, and a new meaning to life. As Blake stood by Rachel's side, his arm wrapped protectively around her while Chloe clung to his other hand, he realized he had found his home. Not in his penthouse or his sprawling mansions, but in their laughter, their love, and their shared dreams. He lost the bet, but he won a family. And in that, he found his greatest victory. This story isn't just about a millionaire and a waitress. It's about redemption, forgiveness, and the power of love to change a person's heart. It reminds us that we are all capable of growth, that no one is beyond saving, and that love is the most powerful force of all. Do you believe in second chances? Can love truly change a person? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or made you believe in love again, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story of love, hope, and redemption. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. We'll see you in the next story.